Hello, and welcome back to Void Whispers. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy the Void Whispers that creep in during the dead of night, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1. What do you think comes after death? Do you think there is another life waiting for us? Some bright afterlife? Darkness? Nothing at all? I used to wonder about it sometimes, the way everyone does when they are lying awake at night and their mind goes places it should not go. I wish I could answer that question. I really do. But I do not think what happened to me is what is supposed to happen after death. I do not think this is the natural end of a normal life. Whatever I am now, whatever road I have been forced onto, it feels wrong. It feels stolen. It feels like I am walking around in a body that is not fully mine, with memories that keep falling out of my head one by one. I was a normal person once. At least I honestly believed I was. I grew up in the time when technology was already becoming part of daily life, but it was still nothing like it is now. I was born sometime in the mid-90s, around 1995, I think. Even that detail feels a little loose in my mind now, like a photo that has been left too long in the sun. I came from a pretty well-off family. We were not billionaires or anything, but we were comfortable. I had parents who gave me what I needed, a twin sister who never stopped teasing me, and a grandfather we visited every month. My grandfather lived in an old house with another woman around his age. For a long time, I thought my actual grandmother must have died when I was very young. I could not remember her at all. I had no clear memories of her face, her voice, or anything she ever said to me. My family never really talked about her either, or at least I do not remember them doing it. So, in my mind, it made sense that the older woman living with my grandfather was probably someone he had married later in life. That was about as complicated as my family seemed. Most of my childhood was simple. When I had free time, I spent it messing with technology. If there was a phone, a laptop, an old computer tower, a game console, or even a broken remote control near me, I wanted to open it and see how it worked. Sometimes I fixed things. Sometimes I ruined them completely. And when I ruined something, I would usually ask my parents or my grandfather for the newest version and wait until they bought it for me. My sister always said I was going to grow up and marry a computer. She said I spent so much time in my room with screens and parts and wires that I would never meet an actual girl. I told her she was being dramatic, but deep down I was not sure she was wrong. Then I met Laura. I met her during my junior year in computer science class. She sat near me for a few weeks before we really started talking. One day she complimented something I had done on an assignment. I complimented her back, probably in the most awkward way possible. And then, somehow, I found the courage to ask if she wanted to hang out at lunch. To my surprise, she said yes. After that, we started talking more. Then we started spending time together after school. Then we went on a real date. I remember being nervous, but I also remember how easy it felt with her. She was smart, funny, and calm in a way that made me feel safe. She knew software the way I knew hardware. She could look at messy code and make sense of it the same way I could look inside a broken machine and understand what was wrong. My sister was shocked. She kept saying she could not believe I had found a woman who liked me more than computers did. Laura and I stayed together through college. I never really got to know her parents. Or maybe I did and cannot remember it anymore. I do not even know if she had siblings. That is one of the worst parts of all this. I am not sure what I truly never knew and what I have simply lost. Even my wedding day is foggy now. That hurts more than I can explain. A person should remember their own wedding clearly. They should remember the way their wife looked walking toward them, the music, the people, the first dance, the stupid jokes, the nervous smile. I remember pieces. A white dress, Laura's hands in mine, someone laughing, my sister crying and pretending she was not crying. But most of it is blurred, like a video with half the frames missing. Laura and I got married about a year after college. I got my degree in engineering because I wanted to become a hardware engineer. Eventually, I opened a small shop where I built and fixed computers. I also repaired laptops, phones, and whatever else people brought in. Sometimes old people came in with devices they did not understand. Sometimes high school kids came in to browse or ask questions. Sometimes small business owners came in with broken machines they needed fixed quickly. Laura became a software engineer for Google. She made more money than I did, and I used to joke that she was the breadwinner. But we were both good at what we did. We lived comfortably. We had a quiet life, a nice home, normal problems, and normal dreams. That was my life. Ordinary, average, comfortable. Then one day a man in a suit walked into my shop carrying a busted computer. He looked maybe a year or two older than me. Clean haircut, expensive shoes, calm expression. He looked more like someone who should have an assistant fix his problems than someone who would walk into a small repair shop himself. The computer he carried was strange. Not strange in a glowing alien way. It was not some super advanced piece of science fiction technology. It just looked new. Different, like it belonged to a company that was a few steps ahead of everyone else, but not so far ahead that it seemed impossible. The casing was unusual. The parts were custom, and the design did not match any brand I recognized. And when I say it was busted, I mean it was almost destroyed. I had to replace nearly half the internal parts. Some pieces were cracked, some were burned out, and some looked like they had been damaged on purpose. It took me 3 days to get it working again. When I called the man to tell him it was ready, he came back in the same suit, looking just as calm as before. I charged him extra. A lot extra. Looking back, it was kind of scummy. But the machine looked like company property, and I figured if his company could afford something like that, they could afford the bill. He did not even argue. He paid the full price without blinking. I thought that was the end of it. It was not. He came back the next day. Same suit. Same calm face. At first, he only complimented my work. He said I had done an excellent job, and that not many people would have been able to repair that system. It was a little strange for someone to return just to say thank you, but not strange enough to make me worry. Then he slid an envelope across the counter. Before I could ask what it was, he gave me a small nod and left. Inside the envelope was a letter inviting me to test a new piece of technology. There was also a few $1,000s in cash and an address. I cannot remember the address anymore. I also cannot remember the name of the company. That bothers me. I think the company name is gone from my mind on purpose. At the time, though, I did not see it as a red flag. I knew I was good with technology. I had just repaired their strange computer. I had charged them a ridiculous amount, and they had paid without question. So I believed they were a real company with real money, and maybe they really did want someone like me to test something. I wish I had thrown that envelope away. I wish I had gone home to Laura and eaten the dinner she left in the fridge. Instead, I called her and told her I needed to pick up a few things for the shop. She answered in that soft voice I loved and told me dinner would be waiting for me when I got home. I never made it back to that dinner. The building was normal from the outside, just another gray corporate building with a company name above the doors that I cannot remember no matter how hard I try. The harder I think about it, the more it slips away, like my mind is pushing me back from it. When I went inside, the same suited man was waiting behind a counter. He recognized me right away and welcomed me in. Then he led me deeper into the building. That was when the place stopped looking normal. The inside was filled with technology I had never seen before. Machines with no visible brand names, screens showing data I could not understand, devices that looked unfinished, experimental, dangerous. For the first time, I felt nervous, not excited. Nervous, the man explained something to me about the device I would be testing. I am almost sure he gave me a full briefing, but that memory is foggy now. All I clearly remember is him placing a small black object into my hand. It was oval-shaped and small enough to fit in my palm. There was a little display on the front and a tiny dot above it where a red light shined steadily. It looked like a sad corporate version of a Tamagotchi. He gave me the device, the cash, and then I was on my way. When I got into my car, I sat there for a minute and stared at it. I could not understand why anyone would pay me thousands of dollars to test something that looked so simple. I turned it over in my hand, looking for buttons or screws or anything that would tell me what it did. My thumb rested near the top. Then, something pricked me. I cursed and dropped the device. It hit the floor by my feet with a hard little clatter. I looked at my thumb and saw a tiny bead of blood forming where it had stabbed me. What the hell? I muttered. I picked the device up again. The screen had changed. The background glowed with a pale green light, and in the middle of the screen was one number. That was all, just a 1. I wanted to storm back into the building and ask what kind of game they were playing, but it was getting late and I was tired. I decided I would go home, explain everything to Laura, and come back the next day for answers. That was the plan. Then the crash happened. I was driving home when the car started to feel strange. It shook under me, and the steering felt wrong. My tire pressure light had turned on, but I did not notice it right away. At first, I thought I must have run over something and punctured a tire. I moved toward the side of the road, planning to pull over. Then, a car in the opposite lane swerved directly into mine. It hit me full force. The last thing I remember seeing clearly was a black van. It had a company logo on the side, the same logo from the building, the same company that gave me the device. Then there was impact. I think I was thrown through the windshield. I remember cold air, pain, broken glass, and a sense that my body was no longer where it should be. I remember trying to breathe and not being able to. I remember thinking, with strange calm, that I was dying. Then everything went black. I woke up in a gray room. I did not recognize it, but somehow I felt like I should. That was the strangest part. It was unfamiliar, but it carried a feeling of guilt, like I had forgotten something important and hurt someone by forgetting it. Everything in the room was gray, only in different shades. The walls were pale gray. The furniture was darker gray. The light outside the window was the brightest thing in the room, But it was not sunlight exactly. It was too still. An old woman sat in a chair next to the bed. Looking at her made my chest ache. She felt warm, comforting, familiar, but I could not remember her. I tried to speak to her, I think. I asked who she was. Maybe I asked where I was. She did not answer. She sat perfectly still, like a mannequin. Her eyes were open, but there was nothing alive in them, nothing that saw me. After a while, I got up. There was a door across the room, glowing softly around the edges. I walked toward it because there was nowhere else to go. When I opened it and stepped through, everything went black again. I woke up in a motel room. It was not a dream. I knew that immediately because my body still hurt. My clothes were torn in places. My skin was bruised. My head throbbed. I had almost nothing on me except the device, the cash, and my tool belt, which was missing a few screws and drivers. My phone was gone. My wallet was gone. Everything normal was gone. When I went outside, the smell of cheap alcohol and cigarette smoke hit me. A flickering sign told me I was at some roadside motel I did not recognize. I went to the front desk and asked the receptionist when I had arrived. He barely looked up and said he was not sure. People came and went all the time. I needed to call Laura. I found a payphone nearby and picked up the receiver. Then I froze. I could not remember her number. I stood there with the phone pressed to my ear, my heart pounding, trying to force the digits into my mind. Nothing came. I remembered her face. I remembered her voice. I remembered loving her. But I did not remember her phone number. The only number I remembered was my sister's. Our mother had drilled it into both of us when we were kids. She always said twins should know how to find each other if they ever got separated. So I called my sister. When she answered, I nearly broke down. I asked her to come get me. She sounded confused and annoyed. She said she could not because she was visiting Grandma Libby's grave. I went silent. Who? I asked. Grandma Libby, she said. I told her I did not know a Grandma Libby. She scolded me like I was joking. She said it was not funny to pretend I had forgotten one of our grandmothers. But I was not pretending. Before I could explain, I saw a black van pull into the motel parking lot. The same kind of van from the crash. My blood went cold. I dropped the phone and ran. There was a wooded area behind the motel, and I sprinted into it without thinking. 2 men jumped out of the van and chased me. I could hear them shouting to each other. I could see their flashlights cutting through the trees behind me. As I ran, I grabbed handfuls of rocks and shoved them into my tool belt. Whenever their lights got too close, I threw rocks in the opposite direction to make noise and pull them away. It worked for a while, but not for long. They kept coming. Then I thought of the device. I hid behind a thick tree, pulled out a screwdriver, and opened the little black oval as fast as my shaking hands allowed. Inside, tucked carefully among the parts, was a tiny tracking chip. I recognized it because a sketchy man had once brought a probably stolen company laptop into my shop, and it had used something very similar. I ripped the tracker out carefully, trying not to damage anything else. I had just screwed the device back together when one of the men found me. He was the one with only a flashlight. The other man had a gun. I had seen it earlier, mounted with a flashlight attachment. I knew if that one found me first, I would be dead again. The man opened his mouth, probably to call his partner. I moved before he could. I sprang up and drove the screwdriver into his temple. He dropped instantly. I stood over him, breathing hard, my hand still wrapped around the screwdriver. I felt sick. I had never killed anyone before. I wanted to tell myself it was self-defense, and maybe it was. If I had let them take me, I was sure they would have killed me again or done something worse. But knowing that did not make the body at my feet any easier to look at. Then the device beeped. I looked down. The screen, which had shown a 1 before, now showed 0. The beeping got faster when I moved it closer to the man's chest. At first, I did not understand. Then I pressed my fingers against his neck. There was still a faint pulse. His body was dying, but not fully dead yet. The brain was likely destroyed, but the body still had some life left in it. A horrible thought came into my mind. I did not want to do it, but I also did not want to die. I opened his shirt, made a hole near his chest, and pressed the device against the wound. For a minute, nothing happened. Then, the screen changed. The blood dripped off the device, and the number returned to 1. The man's body went cold immediately. Not slowly, the way bodies are supposed to. It was like something had turned him off. His skin tightened. His flesh started to decay at a sickening speed. Within minutes, there was almost nothing left but bone. Then, even that began to crumble into dust. I ran before the other man could find me. The dead man had a phone. I took it. Before doing anything else, I searched my own name. The first result made me sit down against a tree and shake. 26-year-old man found dead after drunk driving crash. There was an article, then another, then a video. I watched my wife crying on a news segment, speaking about drunk driving and how quickly it could destroy a family. They showed a closed body bag, saying it contained my remains. I was dead. The world believed I was dead. And somehow, I was still there. I could not go back to Laura. How could I? I had no explanation. My body had been found. My funeral would happen. There would be questions, tests, police, doctors, the company. I wanted my normal life more than anything, but it was already gone. I sobbed for a long time. Too long. The other man found me, the one with the gun. I heard a shout, saw the light, and then there was a flash of pain in my head so sharp it felt like my skull had split open. Then black. Then the gray room again. This time, the old woman was not alone. A man stood near the wall. He looked around my age. His face was strangely familiar, but not because I knew him. Because parts of him looked like Laura. The shape of his face, his hair, something in the eyes. Then I understood. My sister had told me I forgot Grandma Libby. Maybe Grandma Libby was not really gone from my life. Maybe she had been erased from me when I crossed from that gray place back into the world. And now this man was someone else I had forgotten. A relative, maybe. Laura's brother. When I walked through the glowing door again, I woke in a cabin somewhere in the mountains near where I had lived. I was in a different body, or at least a changed one. My face felt wrong when I touched it. My bones did not sit exactly the same. My nose felt different. My jaw felt different. The device was still with me. I needed to know what had happened to my original body. If the man I killed turned to dust, had my body done the same thing? Would there be 2 bodies? Would the police find something impossible? I had to know. I stole a phone and searched death records. I found my grave near where I used to live. That made sense. Laura would have wanted me close enough to visit. Sweet, caring Laura. and I had given all of it away for some strange device in easy cash. I went to the cemetery at night. I found my grave and dug with my bare hands. I dug until my fingers bled and dirt packed under my nails. After 40 minutes, maybe more, I hit the coffin. Using the same bloody screwdriver, I broke through enough to open it. Inside was a suit and dust. No body, no face, no proof of me except what looked like human remains turned almost to powder, just like the man in the woods. But there were things buried with me. One of them was the device. Another device. I reached into my pocket. The device was still there, too. Somehow, it had copied itself when I died. The other thing was my wallet. Inside were 3 photos. The first was of Laura and me on our wedding day. I stared at it until my eyes filled with tears. The second was a family photo. My parents, my sister, my grandfather, and the old woman, Grandma Libby. The third photo was another wedding picture. I recognized some faces then, I think, but I do not anymore. I believe it showed my family and my sister on my side, and Laura with a group of people on hers. Maybe her parents, maybe her brother, maybe people I loved once. I cried again, but I had learned my lesson. Crying too long got me killed. So I took the wallet, the extra device, and the photos. Then I filled the grave back in as best I could. Since then, I have learned what happens when I die. I have died 7 times now. Each time, I come back with my face changed. Not completely different every time, but different enough. A new bone structure, a different nose, a different distance between my eyes, a mouth that does not look like mine. Some mornings, when I find a mirror, I stare at myself and feel nothing, because I do not know the person looking back. Each death costs me a person, not a random memory. A person. Grandma Libby was the first one I noticed. Then, probably Laura's brother. Then, I think, Laura's parents. Their faces in the photo looked like older versions of Laura and that man in the gray room, but now when I try to remember them, there is only fog. After that, I lost 3 more people. Friends or relatives, maybe. People I must have known well enough for the gray room to take them from me. I also lose details. Company names, conversations, places, little things a person should be able to recall if they try hard enough. The memories do not vanish all at once. They loosen. They rot at the edges. Then one day, they are gone. I stopped digging up graves after my 4th death. I could not keep doing it. I could not keep looking at dust and objects and proof that I was becoming less human each time. I feel like a shell now, a walking corpse with pieces of a man's memory stuck inside it. I tried to get rid of the device. I threw it into rivers. I buried it. I smashed one with a hammer. I left it in motel rooms, bus stations, trash cans, and storm drains. It always came back. A pocket. A drawer. A bag I was sure had been empty. The passenger seat of a stolen car. Eventually, I stopped fighting it. Now I move from state to state. I never stay anywhere too long. The longest I stayed in one place was about a year in Minnesota. Then I died there. I do not remember how, and honestly, I do not care anymore. Every time I come back, I have to open the device and rip out the new tracker before the company finds me again. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes they get close. Black vans. Men in suits. Flashlights in the trees. Phones that suddenly stop working. Rooms that feel watched. But I have gotten better at running. And I have gotten better at surviving. That is the worst part. At first, I only used the device because I was desperate, because I was dying, because I told myself the person was already gone, or old, or sick, or bad enough that it did not matter. Now I do not always wait for excuses. The device has 12 on it now, 12 lives, 12 stolen chances. I tell myself I need them because I still want to find the company. I tell myself I need them because I might still find a way back to Laura. I tell myself I need them because if the device ever reaches 0 at the wrong time, I will go into that gray room again, and another person will be waiting there, silent and forgotten. But the truth is simpler and uglier. I am afraid to die for real. I am afraid of what happens when there is no one left for me to forget. I am writing this down because I do not trust my own mind anymore. One day I may forget Laura. One day I may look at the wedding photo and feel nothing. One day I may not even remember that I was ever a husband, a brother, a son, or a normal man who fixed computers in a small shop. So this is my reminder. My name was real once. My life was real once. I had a wife named Laura. I had a twin sister. I had a family. I had a grandmother named Libby, even if I forgot her. I had a shop. I had dinner waiting in the fridge. And to the company that gave me the device that ruined my life, if you are reading this, I hope you are satisfied. You turned death into a door. You turned life into a number. And you turned me into something that keeps walking, even when the man inside should have been gone a long time ago. Story 2. The town of Eveleth was not the kind of place that felt gently placed on the land. It felt like it had been carved out of it by force. It sat in northern Minnesota, where the winters were sharp, the air smelled of cold metal and pine, and the ground itself seemed stubborn. People there did not talk much about dreams or feelings. They talked about work, weather, trucks, school, hockey, church, and the mine. The mine was everything. It was a huge open pit at the edge of town, a man-made canyon that dropped deep into the earth. It was more than 1,000 feet down in places, with walls of red and brown rock cut open like a wound. The iron-rich soil had made Eveleth what it was. Men had worked that pit for generations. Fathers, sons, uncles, grandfathers, families measured time by shifts, accidents, layoffs, and strikes. Some people hated the mine. Some people loved it. Most simply accepted it as part of life, the way others accepted the sky or the lake or the long winter. The people of Eveleth were hard people, not cruel, but hard in the way people become when the land and the work never make life easy. They were proud of their town, proud of the mine, proud of the red dust that settled on boots, trucks, porches, and windowsills. The mine had fed them, housed them, and buried some of them. It was their life and their history. But beneath that mine, beneath the iron and the rock, something had been waiting. It was older than the town, older than the mine, older than the trees that stood along the roads and the frozen lakes that shone white in January. It had been sleeping far below the ground, deep in a place where no human hand was ever meant to reach. And the miners had woken it. At first, nothing obvious happened. There was no explosion, no earthquake, no monster crawling out of the pit. The machines still ran. The trucks still groaned along the roads. The men still went down before sunrise with coffee in their hands and came home tired, coughing dust into their fists. Life continued like it always had. Then the dreams started. They did not begin as normal nightmares. That was the worst part. If they had been simple nightmares, people might have laughed them off. A bad dream after a long shift. A child scared by a movie. An old woman waking from a memory. But these dreams were different. They were too clear, too shared, too exact. Every person in Eveleth began to dream the same thing. The miners dreamed it first, or at least they were the first to talk about it. Then their wives dreamed it. Then the children. Then the teachers, store clerks, nurses, mechanics, church ladies, and retired men who sat outside the diner drinking coffee. No one was spared. In the dream, they saw a city. But it was not a city any human mind could fully understand. Its towers leaned in directions that should not have been possible. Its streets turned in on themselves and then unfolded into shapes that made no sense. Stairways climbed down. Doorways opened into empty sky. Walls breathed like lungs. Bridges curved through space and connected places that were nowhere near each other. The buildings were made of impossible angles, strange lines and smooth surfaces that shifted while people looked at them. The city glowed with a sickly light that was not blue, not purple, not green, but some wrong color that the mind could almost understand and then reject. People woke with the memory of it burning behind their eyes. They could not describe it properly, but they knew they had all seen the same thing. And always there was the sound, a high, thin chittering. It was not exactly like insects, not exactly like teeth, not exactly like bones clicking together. It was all of those things and none of them. People woke screaming, not because of the dream itself, but because the sound stayed with them after they opened their eyes. It did not echo in the room. It echoed inside them, deep in the bone behind the eyes. At first, people blamed stress. The mine had been pushing harder that year. There had been longer shifts, more blasting, more pressure to pull iron from the ground. Some said the miners had brought the fear home with them. Others said it was something in the air, or something about the long, dark nights that came before winter. People in small towns do not like admitting that something impossible is happening. They look for normal reasons first. Always, Old Man Peterson was the first person people could not explain away. Everyone knew him. He had worked the pit for most of his life, starting when he was barely old enough to be called a man. His back was bent, his hands were thick and scarred, and his face had been burned brown by sun and wind. He was the kind of old man who sat on his porch every morning with black coffee and gave a short nod to anyone who passed. He talked about the weather, the mine, and the price of iron ore, nothing else. Then he stopped. He began sitting on his porch for hours without moving, staring east toward the open pit. His coffee would go cold beside him. His wife, Martha, would call him inside, but he would not answer right away. Sometimes she had to touch his shoulder before he seemed to remember where he was. When neighbors asked if he was all right, he would look at them with wide, unfocused eyes and say things that made no sense. The geometries below, he whispered one morning to a mail carrier. Another day, he told a group of children walking home from school that the stars were wrong. All wrong, he said, looking up at the clear afternoon sky as if he could see the stars even then. They're not stars, just reflections. Reflections of what's down there. People were worried, but at first they were kind. Peterson was old. Old men sometimes slipped away in pieces. Maybe it was memory trouble. Maybe it was grief. Maybe years of dust and blasting had finally done something to his mind. Then others began to whisper too, not always with their mouths. The whispers came on the wind that blew off Ely Lake, cold and sharp, even in warmer months. People heard them while standing in their yards. They heard them in their kitchens, in grocery aisles, in church pews, and in the quiet moments before sleep. The whispers were not like normal words. They were more like thoughts pushed into the mind by something outside it. They carried meaning without language. They spoke of hunger, not hunger like a person feels when missing a meal, but a great hunger that stretched across ages. A hunger older than animals, older than oceans, older than light. They spoke of a universe that was not empty, not dead, and not kind. A universe that was alive and dreaming. A universe that did not notice people any more than people noticed dust. They spoke of surrender. They promised that the fear would end if people stopped fighting. They promised the final form, a better shape, a joining. They promised that bodies were only temporary tools, badly made and easily broken. They promised that what slept below could fix them. Some people prayed. Some drank. Some refused to talk about it. But all of them heard it. The changes began slowly. Peterson's skin was the first clear sign. His skin had always been tough and dark from years in the sun. Then, over a few days, it began to lose color. At first, Martha thought he looked pale because he was sick. Then, the paleness deepened into something worse. His skin became almost translucent, a waxy white that looked too thin for a living body. Blue veins showed beneath the surface, pulsing in slow, uneven rhythms. Martha could hardly look at him. She loved her husband, but the sight of his skin made her stomach turn. It looked less like skin and more like old candle wax stretched over something moving underneath. Then his eyes changed. Peterson had always had gentle blue eyes, watery with age but kind. One morning, Martha found him standing in the kitchen, staring at the window. His irises had clouded over. The blue was almost gone. His pupils had spread wide until they looked like deep black holes. They reflected no light, no emotion, no recognition. When Martha said his name, he smiled without warmth and whispered, "It's almost time." The town still tried to find a normal reason. They began blaming the water. Not the well water in people's homes, at least not at first. They blamed the strange sludge that had started gathering in the pond at the town park. The pond had always been ugly, more decorative than natural, but now it looked diseased. A thick, oily layer floated on its surface, shimmering with a rainbow sheen. Even on still days, a chemical smell rose from it. Sweet, rotten, metallic. Parents told children to stay away from it. But children do not always listen. Some had already played near the banks before anyone realized something was wrong. They came home scratching their arms and legs, complaining of rashes. Their parents washed the skin, put cream on it, and told them not to touch the pond again. But the rashes did not heal. They spread. Small patches of skin lost their color. Then those patches lost texture too. They became pale, waxy, and brittle, like old paper. In some children, the skin cracked in fine lines. In others, it peeled away and revealed smooth, colorless skin beneath. People wanted to believe it was poison, some kind of chemical spill, mine waste, bad runoff, something that could be tested, blamed, cleaned up, and forgotten. They did not understand that it was not simple contamination. It was communion. The change was not the same for everyone. That made it even more terrifying. It did not spread like a normal sickness. It seemed to know each person differently. It worked on them in private ways, reshaping them according to some design no one could see. Mrs. Gable, the schoolteacher, was one of the next to change. She had taught almost every child in town at some point. She was strict but fair, with silver glasses and a soft voice that became sharp only when a student lied. One morning, she arrived at school wearing gloves even though it was warm inside. She kept them on through class. When a student asked why, she snapped at him so harshly that the room went silent. By the end of the week, she could not hide it. Extra fingers had begun growing from her left hand. At first, they were small bumps along the side of her palm. Then they lengthened. The new fingers were too thin, too long, and slightly crooked. They moved even when she tried to keep them still. Each one ended in a black, sharp claw that looked like polished stone. When the principal tried to send her home, she looked at him and clicked her tongue against her teeth in a way that made the children cry. The postman, Gary, changed differently. Gary had been a friendly man with a round face and a loud laugh. He knew everyone's name, and he waved from his truck even to people he did not like. Then his jaw began to hurt. He told people it was probably a tooth infection. A dentist appointment was made, but he never went. His jaw stretched over the next several days. It lengthened slowly, painfully, pulling his face into a shape that was almost animal. His teeth sharpened into jagged points. His lips split in the corners because his mouth could no longer close properly. The sounds came from him first. Low clicks, wet hisses, small chattering noises from the back of his throat. At first, people thought he was choking or trying to speak. Then, one morning, a group of altered townsfolk gathered around him outside the post office. Gary opened his long mouth and made a series of clicks, and the others answered. That was when the people of Eveleth heard the new language for the first time. The town itself began to change with them. The air lost its clean smell of pine, lake wind, and cold iron. In its place came a sweet coppery stench that stuck to the throat and clothes. People could smell it inside their homes, even with the windows shut. Food began to taste like pennies. Milk spoiled faster. Meat turned gray in refrigerators before its time. The sounds of Eveleth changed, too. There had always been the noise of work, trucks rumbling, machines clanking, men shouting across lots, trains moving heavy loads of iron ore. Those sounds faded, not because the machines stopped at once, but because no one seemed to care about them anymore. The whole town became filled with chittering, clicking, and a low humming that seemed to come from the earth itself. At night, the humming was worse. People lay awake, feeling it through their beds. It rose through the floors and into their bones. It matched the rhythm of their hearts until they could no longer tell if the sound was outside them or inside them. The community broke apart. Eveleth had always been tightly connected. People knew each other's business. They helped shovel driveways, brought food after funerals, and showed up when someone's truck would not start. But now fear twisted those bonds into something ugly. Families turned on each other. A husband would begin to change, while his wife stayed human. A child would wake with black eyes, while the parents still looked normal. Some families tried to hide their changed loved ones in bedrooms and basements. Others locked them out. There were fights in kitchens, shouting matches in yards, and calls to the sheriff that ended with the deputy hanging up because he, too, had started clicking between words. The church became the strangest place of all. It stood at the center of town, a sturdy wooden building with white paint and a bell that had rung for weddings, funerals, and Sunday service for decades. People came there looking for safety. They wanted answers. They wanted God to explain what the mine had opened. But by then, even the church had begun to feel wrong. The parishioners sat silently in the pews, no longer singing, no longer praying. They stared at the pulpit with empty eyes, as if waiting for something to rise from behind it. The pastor tried to read scripture one Sunday morning, but his voice shook so badly that he stopped halfway through. In the silence that followed, Mrs. Gable lifted her clawed hand and scratched slow lines into the wooden pew. No one moved to stop her. By then, the dreams were no longer only dreams. People began seeing the impossible city while awake. A miner would look into a puddle and see towering shapes turning beneath the water. A child would look at the classroom wall and watch the corners bend inward. Martha Peterson said that when she looked at her husband, she sometimes saw another face behind his face, a huge and distant thing peering through him. The pit began to glow at night. At first, it was faint, a violet shimmer deep below the lowest benches of the mine. The workers who still came near it said the light pulsed like a heartbeat. The closer a person got, the louder the whispers became. Some walked down into the mine and never returned. Others came back changed, smiling with black eyes, their bodies bent in ways that made neighbors pull their curtains shut. The last normal day in Eveleth was gray and cold. Clouds hung low over the town. The air felt heavy, as if the sky itself was pressing down. No trucks moved on the roads. No children waited at bus stops. Stores remained closed, their front windows dark. The whole town seemed to be holding its breath. Then the chittering began. It started softly, from one house, then another. A click in a kitchen, a hiss from a front porch, a wet scratching sound from behind a closed bedroom door. Soon, it was everywhere. The humming from the earth grew louder, deep and steady, shaking window glass in its frames. Then, the voice came. It rose from the pit. It was not one voice, but many. Countless whispers layered together until they became something single and enormous. It was a command, a promise, an invitation. No human language can truly hold what it said, but every person in Eveleth understood it. Come down. Become whole. Return to the shape beneath shape. The altered townsfolk began to walk. Doors opened across town. People stepped out into the gray afternoon, though many of them were no longer fully people. Their limbs had stretched too long. Their joints bent the wrong way. Their skin shone pale and waxy. Some had extra fingers. Some had too many teeth. Some had eyes like black glass. Some moved with a terrible spidery gait, their knees and elbows lifting in sharp angles. Old man Peterson led them. His body had become almost translucent. As he walked, the lines of his face shifted under his skin, like bones moving in wet clay. Veins pulsed across his body in slow patterns of blue and violet. He did not look left or right. He looked only toward the mine. Behind him came Mrs. Gable, her clawed fingers opening and closing. Gary followed, his long jaw clicking as he made sounds that the others answered. Children walked beside their parents, husbands beside wives, neighbors beside neighbors. They moved together, no longer as separate people, but as parts of one larger thing. Those who had not changed, or who had not yet changed enough, watched from behind curtains, under beds, inside locked bathrooms. and from the shadows of basements. Some cried, some prayed, some covered their ears, though it did nothing to block the voice in their minds. The procession reached the edge of the mine. The pit yawned open before them, huge and deep, its walls cut by years of human labor. But now, it no longer looked like a mine. The shadows inside it had taken shape. The sickly violet light from the drains pulsed from below, bright enough to paint the clouds above the town. And within the depths, the impossible city was visible. Not fully, never fully, but enough. Angles shifted in the darkness. Towers turned without moving. Wide doors opened in walls that were not there a moment before. Streets looped into empty space and returned from below. The architecture looked alive, not built of stone or metal, but of thought, hunger, and breathing ideas. The people of Eveleth began to descend. They did not fall. They did not scream. They walked down into the mine willingly, step by step, following the paths carved by decades of work. The violet light touched them, and their bodies changed faster. Backs bent, arms lengthened, skin split and reformed. Mouths opened in joy or pain, though by then those two things may have become the same to them. Old Peterson reached the lower dark first. He turned once, looking back toward the town with his black, empty eyes. Then he smiled, and his face unfolded. After that, the others followed him into the light. As the last of them disappeared, the sun sank behind the clouds, and the final daylight faded from Eveleth. The town above was left quiet. Empty houses stood with doors hanging open. A swing moved by itself in a yard where no child would play again. The church bell rang once in the wind, then went still. For a while there was silence. Then a new sound rose from the depths of the pit. It was not the chittering. It was not the humming. It was a low, soft whisper, smooth and endless. It slipped out of the mine and moved over the empty streets. It flowed past the farmhouse roads, the closed diner, the schoolhouse, the church, the gas station, and the park pond still shining with that oily rainbow skin. The whisper did not stop at Eveleth. The wind carried it over the Iron Range, across the fields and roads and frozen lakes, toward other towns where people still slept peacefully in their beds, unaware of what had woken beneath the earth. And in that whisper was the same promise, the same hunger, the same invitation. Come down, become whole, listen long enough, and the shape beneath shape will welcome you too. Story 3. Marcus died on a Tuesday. It was one of those normal work days that did not feel important while it was happening. The coffee machine on the third floor was broken again. Someone from accounting had burned popcorn in the break room microwave. The air conditioning was too cold near the north windows and too warm near the conference rooms. People complained about meetings, deadlines, printer jams, and the same little problems we complained about every day. Then Marcus died at his desk. He was 43 years old. Heart attack. That was what everyone said, and that was what the company email said later. Cardiac event. It sounded clean and professional, like something that belonged in a report instead of something that had happened to a real person between the office plants and the row of gray cubicles near the east wall. I was not close friends with Marcus, but I knew him well enough. Everyone did. He worked in finance, but he somehow knew people from every department. He was the kind of guy who always had a quick comment ready when someone passed his desk. Not loud, not annoying, just present. He had a laugh you could hear from 2 rows over, and he kept a tiny plastic dinosaur beside his monitor because his daughter had given it to him when she was 6. The dinosaur was still there after they took him away. That was the part I kept thinking about. People reacted the way people react when death interrupts their workday. Some cried. Some went quiet. Some suddenly became very busy, because being busy is easier than feeling anything. Human Resources sent out a message about grief counseling. Managers told everyone they could go home if they needed to. A few people actually did. For the rest of the week, the office felt different. Everyone spoke a little softer near Marcus's desk. People avoided looking at his chair. Someone placed flowers there on Wednesday morning. By Thursday, half the office had ordered standing desks or step counters or blood pressure monitors. Everyone talked about stress, exercise, family history, and how you never really knew how much time you had. By the next week, most of that faded. The standing desks stayed in their boxes. The flowers started to droop. The little dinosaur still sat beside Marcus's dark monitor. I am a systems administrator, which means I see the office in a different way than most people do. Most employees see desks, badge readers, email, shared folders, and the little login screen that appears every morning. I see accounts, permissions, sessions, access requests, failed logins, file movements, audit trails, and the quiet digital shadow every person leaves behind. When someone joins the company, I help build that shadow. When someone leaves, I help shut it down. For normal resignations, the process is boring. A manager sends a request. HR confirms the final date. It disables the account, revokes access, collects the laptop, wipes the phone, and archives the mailbox. It is all tickets and checkboxes. Death makes the same process feel wrong. Marcus's credentials were deactivated that Friday. I know because I was copied on the email. It came from IT Operations, with HR and security included. The subject line was simple: account deactivation completed. Inside, it listed his username, employee ID, laptop asset tag, mailbox status, VPN access, HR database access, finance system access, and building badge status. Everything had been disabled. I read it twice. Not because I expected anything strange, but because I always read those emails twice. It is my job to make sure things are done correctly. A missed access point can become a problem later. A forgotten service account can open a door. A laptop not properly locked can turn into a breach. Marcus's account was closed. His badge was dead. His VPN token was revoked. His HR database permissions were removed. His mailbox was locked and scheduled for archive. That should have been the end of it. 3 weeks later, I was doing a routine log review. Most people think checking logs is some dramatic hacker movie thing, with blinking red warnings and maps of attacks from foreign countries. It is not like that. Most of it is boring. Thousands of lines of timestamps, account names, system IDs, IP addresses, database calls, authentication events, permission checks, and small errors that mean nothing unless you know what to look for. I was looking through after-hours HR database activity because we had recently tightened access rules. HR data is sensitive. Social security numbers, salaries, home addresses, emergency contacts, medical leave notes, performance warnings, disciplinary files, termination reasons. You do not want that kind of data moving around unless you know exactly why. At first, everything looked normal. Then I saw Marcus's username. It appeared at 2:14 a.m. The log said his account had pulled a report from the HR database. I stared at the line for a long time. That was not possible. The report was not part of a scheduled job. It was not an automated export. It was not a nightly backup. It was a manual query, the kind a user runs after logging into the HR system and selecting records directly. The account name was Marcus's. The timestamp was 2:14 a.m. The action was successful. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my eyes. It was late, and I had been looking at too many logs for too long. Sometimes old entries get cached and written out of order. Sometimes system labels are misleading. Sometimes an automated process inherits a user's name in a way that makes the audit trail look strange. There were plenty of normal explanations. I flagged it anyway. I sent it to my manager, Denise. I kept the message short, because nobody likes a long panic email unless there is actually something to panic about. I wrote that Marcus's disabled account appeared in the HR access logs and asked if she knew of any leftover process tied to his credentials. She replied 20 minutes later. Probably a ghost process, she said. That was the phrase she used. A ghost process. She meant an old automated job that had not been cleaned up correctly. Sometimes a report keeps running under a user account after the person who created it leaves. It should not happen, but it does. Usually it means someone took a shortcut months or years ago. Maybe Marcus had built a report for finance using his own access instead of a proper service account. Maybe the system was still tagging his username even though the actual access was happening through a back-end process. That made sense. It was annoying, but it made sense. So I let it go. For 2 nights. Then it happened again. Different report. Different time. Same username. This time, the log entry was at 1:47 a.m. Marcus's account had opened a personnel export and pulled records for a small group of employees. The same HR database. The same kind of manual query. No failed login before it. No session start. No VPN connection. No workstation ID that made sense. Just the access event. Successful, I felt a cold pressure behind my ribs as I stared at the screen. I pulled the full access history for Marcus's account. That is when the situation stopped feeling like a technical issue. His credentials had been used 11 times since his death. Always between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. Always personnel files. Always the same small group of employees. I copied the names into a separate file. There were 7 of us. 2 from finance. 1 from HR. 1 from legal. 1 project manager. 1 executive assistant. And me. My file was in that group. I sat there with my hands resting on the keyboard, not typing. The office around me was quiet except for the low hum of the server room ventilation on the other side of the wall. I had worked late enough that most of the floor was empty. The cleaning crew had already passed through. A vacuum hummed somewhere far away, then stopped. Seeing your own name in a report you are investigating does something strange to your body. It turns a problem into a threat. Before that moment, I was thinking like an admin. After that moment, I was thinking like a target. I opened my own HR file to see what Marcus's account had accessed. Basic information. Address. Salary. Employment history. Emergency contact. Medical leave notes from 2 years ago when I had surgery. Performance reviews. Security access level. Everything. Not copied, as far as the logs showed. Just opened. Viewed, the word viewed bothered me more than copied. Copied meant someone wanted data. Viewed meant someone wanted to read. I escalated it to its security. This time, I did not send a casual message. I opened a formal incident ticket, attached the logs, highlighted the timestamps, included Marcus's deactivation confirmation, and marked it as urgent. I also called one of the security analysts, Patel, because I did not want the tickets sitting in a queue until morning. Patel answered sounding half asleep and annoyed until I said the name. "Marcus?" he asked. "Yes." There was a pause. "Marcus is dead." "I know." Another pause. "Send me everything." I had already sent it. The next day, security pulled in more people. They checked authentication logs, database audit trails, endpoint activity, VPN history, badge records, privileged access logs, backups, service accounts, task schedulers, and old scripts. They looked for signs that someone had stolen Marcus's credentials before his account was disabled. They checked whether another admin had reactivated the account. They checked whether someone had renamed an account to make it look like his. Nothing. No breach. No active session. No source device. No IP address that matched a user connection. No token use. No account reactivation. No failed login. No successful login. The logs showed the access, but technically, according to every other system, the access had not happened. That was the sentence Patel said during the meeting. The logs show the access, but the access didn't happen. Nobody liked that sentence. Denise told us to keep looking. HR looked nervous. Legal looked irritated. Security looked tired. Someone asked if the HR database could be generating false positives. Someone else asked whether Marcus had created reports that were still tied to his old user ID. We had already checked that, but we checked again. There were no scheduled reports under his name, no active jobs, no hidden scripts, no workflow automation, no service process, just 11 manual access events from a dead man's disabled account. During the meeting, I asked why the same 7 employee files were being opened. No one had a good answer. HR said there was no obvious connection between all 7 of us. We were not on the same team. We had not filed the same complaint. We were not part of a layoff list. We did not share a manager. We did not all work on the same project. But that was not completely true. There was one connection. Marcus. Each of us had been in contact with him during his last week alive. That came out quietly, piece by piece. The executive assistant had helped Marcus schedule a meeting with senior management. The legal employee had reviewed a document for him. The HR person had pulled a benefits form for him. One of the finance employees had argued with him over missing numbers. The project manager had asked him to fix a report. I had reset his database access 2 days before he died because he said something was wrong with his account. I remembered the ticket clearly after HR mentioned the dates. Marcus had called me instead of just opening a request. He sounded stressed, but not in a way that stood out at the time. Everyone sounded stressed by the end of the quarter. "My HR access is acting weird," he had said. "You shouldn't be in HR unless it's through the finance reporting view," I told him. "That's what I mean. It's showing me things I shouldn't see." I had asked him what kind of things. He hesitated. Then he said, "Personnel notes, termination stuff, medical codes. I don't think I'm supposed to see it." He was right. He was not supposed to see it. I checked his permissions and found a bad group assignment. At least, that was what it looked like. His account had been added to a temporary HR access group 3 months earlier and never removed. I took him out of it, reset his session, and told him to log back in. "Thanks," he said. Then, just before hanging up, he asked, "Can you see who added me?" I told him I could check, but I was busy and would get back to him. I never did. Marcus died 2 days later. After the meeting, I went back through the permission history. I expected to find some admin name, maybe mine, maybe Denise's, maybe a migration script. But the record was blank, not missing. Blank, like the field existed but had been wiped clean. That was when I started sleeping badly. I kept seeing Marcus's little dinosaur in my head. I kept hearing his voice asking, "Can you see who added me?" At night, I dreamed of database tables stretching into darkness like office hallways. Rows and columns went on forever. Names filled every cell. Some were crossed out, some were circled. Some were still being typed by hands I could not see. For a week, there were no new access events. Security kept the incident open, but people slowly started talking about it less. That is how fear works in an office. At first, everyone whispers. Then the whispers become jokes. Then the jokes become silence. Work has a way of burying everything. Deadlines do not care who died. Reports still have to be filed. Passwords still expire. People still forget how to connect to the printer. By the next Thursday, I was almost ready to believe it had been some rare system error. Almost that night, I stayed late to finish a deadline. We had an audit coming up, and I needed to clean up several access groups before morning. I was the only person on the floor. The overhead lights had dimmed automatically, leaving only every third row glowing. The office looked larger in that half-light. Cubicles became low walls. Empty chairs looked like people sitting very still until you stared directly at them. Marcus's desk was still empty. His monitor had been removed, but the dinosaur was still there. No one had taken it. I tried not to look at it. At 2:10 a.m., I was reviewing privileged access logs. My eyes burned from staring at the screen. I had a cup of coffee beside me that had gone cold an hour earlier. Outside the windows, the parking lot lights reflected on the glass, making it hard to see anything but my own tired face. At 2:14 a.m., my monitor flickered. The screen went black for half a second. Then, a report opened by itself. I did not touch the mouse. I did not touch the keyboard. The report filled the screen. One page, Marcus's personnel file. For a moment, I could not move. I just stared at his name at the top of the page. Marcus Ellery. Employee number, department, hire date, salary band, emergency contact, benefits status, termination reason, cardiac event. The words sat there like a locked door. My hands had gone cold. I looked around the office. The floor was empty. No footsteps. No voices. No movement. The only sound was the soft electronic hum of my computer and the building ventilation breathing through the ceiling vents. I looked back at the screen. The file was real. It was not a screenshot. It was open inside the HR system under my session, but I had not opened it. I checked the audit bar at the bottom. Accessed by Marcus.Ellery, that was impossible. Below the termination reason was the notes field. I had checked Marcus's file before. More than once, after the strange logs started. The notes field had been empty. I knew it had been empty. It was not empty now. Someone had typed a message there. Tell them it wasn't. I read it again. Tell them it wasn't. My mouth went dry. The office felt suddenly too cold. Not normal cold. Not bad air conditioning. This was the kind of cold that makes you feel like the room is no longer meant for living people. The cursor blinked at the end of the sentence. Once, twice, 3 times. Then another line appeared. I watched the words type themselves. They know. My chair rolled backward as I pushed away from the desk. It hit the cubicle wall behind me. The sound cracked through the floor, loud enough to make me jump. The screen flickered again. For 1 second, I saw something behind the report. A dark reflection in the monitor. Someone standing over my shoulder. I spun around. No one was there. When I looked back, the report was gone. My desktop had returned to normal. The HR window was closed. My access logs were still open, exactly where they had been before. But in the fresh log entries, there it was. 214am, Marcus's username. Personnel file accessed. My workstation. I packed up without shutting anything down properly. I left my coffee on the desk, my notes beside the keyboard, and my jacket hanging over the chair. I walked past Marcus's old desk on the way out and made the mistake of looking at it. The dinosaur had moved, not far, just turned slightly. Its little plastic face was pointed toward me. I do not know what Marcus found before he died. I do not know who they are. I do not know why his file says cardiac event when something somewhere wants me to tell them it was not. I only know 3 things. Marcus's credentials were disabled the Friday after he died. His username is still accessing personnel files, and mine is one of them. I have not been back to the office since. Story 4. I used to work in a vegetable drying factory in Pennsylvania. It was not an easy job. Most people think factory work is just standing around and doing the same thing again and again, but after 10 or 12 hours of heat, noise, machines, heavy smells, and the same movements repeated until your arms feel numb, your body starts to feel like it belongs to someone else. By the end of each shift, my clothes smelled like dried onions, peppers, and warm metal. My hands were always rough, my back always hurt, and my eyes burned from staring at moving belts and bright lights for too long. I was 34 years old at the time. I lived alone in a small apartment, not too far from the factory. I was not a dramatic person. I was not looking for trouble. I was just a regular man trying to work, pay rent, eat, sleep, and keep my life quiet. I did not have many close friends, and I was okay with that. After work, all I wanted was a shower, food, maybe some TV, and a few hours of sleep before doing it all again the next day. That night started like any other bad workday. The shift had dragged on forever. Something had gone wrong with one of the drying machines, and everyone had to stay late while maintenance checked it. By the time I clocked out, my body felt empty. The cold air outside hit my face the moment I stepped out of the factory, sharp enough to wake me up a little. It was late, and the parking lot was almost empty. Only a few cars were left under the white lights, and the building behind me hummed like it never really slept. I was too tired to cook at home, so I decided to stop for a quick dinner. There was a small fast food restaurant off the highway that led toward my neighborhood. It was not great food, but it was open late, and that was enough. The place sat near the road with a faded sign, bright windows, and a parking lot that always looked too big for the number of customers inside. I pulled in, parked near the entrance, and went inside. There were only 2 other people in the restaurant. One man sat in a booth near the back, staring at his phone. A young worker behind the counter looked half asleep while taking my order. The place smelled like fried oil, coffee, and floor cleaner. I ordered a burger, fries, and a drink, then sat at a table near the window. The food tasted better than it probably was because I was so hungry. I ate slowly at first, watching the few cars that passed on the dark highway outside. Their headlights appeared out of nowhere, rushed by, and vanished again. Beyond the glass, everything looked black and empty. There was something strange about that night. I cannot explain it in a way that makes perfect sense. The restaurant was quiet, but not peaceful. It felt like the road outside was swallowing sound. Cars passed, but I did not hear them the way I should have. The world felt pressed down, like a heavy blanket had been thrown over everything. Every few minutes, I looked up from my food and stared out the window, because I had the feeling someone was watching me. I did not see anyone. Still, the feeling stayed. When I finished eating, I threw away my trash and walked back to my car. The air was colder now. My breath came out in pale clouds. I unlocked the car quickly and got in, glancing around the lot before closing the door. Nothing moved except a plastic bag caught against the curb. On the drive home, I told myself I was just tired. Too many hours at the factory. Too little sleep. Too much caffeine. That was all. But when I got to my apartment and locked the door behind me, the silence inside felt even heavier than the silence at the restaurant. My apartment was small, but it was mine. A living room with a blue sofa, a small kitchen, one bedroom, one bathroom, and a narrow hallway between them. I kept the lights dim because I liked a calm mood at night. Bright lights made it hard for me to sleep, so I usually turned on only one lamp in the living room and left the rest of the place in soft shadows. That night, the shadows seemed darker than usual. I checked the front door lock twice, more out of habit than fear, then went to my bedroom. I changed clothes, dropped onto the bed, and opened my phone. I scrolled through news, social media, and random stories I had saved, the same way I did most nights. My eyes kept closing, and every time I blinked, it took a little longer to open them again. At some point, sleep took over. My phone slipped from my hand and landed on the blanket beside me. I woke up to the sound of it ringing. For a moment, I did not know where I was. The room was dark. My mouth was dry. My body felt heavy and sore. The ringing seemed too loud in the quiet apartment. I reached for the phone with clumsy fingers and looked at the screen. 2:30 a.m. Unknown number. It was a local number, though, same area code. I stared at it for a few seconds. Confused, nobody called me at that hour. Not unless something was wrong. My first thought was work. Maybe there had been another issue at the factory. Maybe someone needed me to cover a shift. I hated the idea, but I answered. "Hello?" I said, my voice thick with sleep. No one spoke. I waited. All I could hear was breathing. It was light and steady, not heavy like a prankster trying to scare me. It sounded like someone was holding the phone close and listening carefully, like they wanted to hear my reaction. "Hello?" I said again. "Who is this?" The breathing stopped. Then the call ended. I sat there in the dark, staring at the phone. My bedroom felt colder. I listened to the apartment around me. Nothing. No footsteps. No movement outside my door. No sound from the hallway. After a minute, I told myself it was a wrong number. Maybe someone drunk. Maybe someone dialed by accident and got embarrassed. People do strange things late at night. I put the phone back down and tried to sleep. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Same number. This time, I did not answer. I stared at the screen until it stopped. Then I switched my phone to silent mode and turned it face down on the bed. I was annoyed, but not scared yet. Not really. In the morning, I saw 3 missed calls from the same number. They had all come between 3 and 4 in the morning. I remember standing in my kitchen with a cup of coffee in my hand, looking at those missed calls and feeling a small knot form in my stomach. I almost blocked the number right then, but for some reason, I did not. Maybe I wanted to know who it was. Maybe I thought if it was important, they would leave a message. They did not. That day at work was busy, and I did not have much time to think about it. The factory swallowed my attention the way it always did. Machines ran, supervisors shouted, people moved crates and checked trays. The whole place smelled like hot vegetables and steam. At lunch, I went home to change my clothes because I had spilled something on my shirt. I had just stepped inside when my phone rang again. Same number. This time, anger rose before fear. I answered and snapped, "Who is this? Stop calling me." "Silence. Say something," I said. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then I heard a faint sound. It might have been a laugh, but it was so low and muffled that it could also have been a sigh. My heart beat a little faster. Then the call ended. I stood in my living room with the phone in my hand, staring at the screen. I told myself it was a stupid prank. Maybe some bored kid. Maybe someone from work messing with me. Maybe an old wrong number situation. I changed my shirt, went back to work, and tried to forget about it. The rest of the day passed normally. That night, I came home, made something simple to eat, and sat on the blue sofa in my living room. I turned on Netflix and tried to relax. The lamp near the sofa was on, and the rest of the apartment was dim. Outside, the curtains were half open. I never thought much about it before. My apartment was on a quiet street, and I was not on the ground floor, so I did not worry about people looking in. Then, my phone lit up. Same number. I did not answer. Instead, I opened a message and typed, "If you call again, I'm calling the police." I hit send. The reply came almost immediately. "You're in the living room now, sitting on the blue sofa." I froze. The TV kept playing, but I could not hear it anymore. I looked down at the message, then slowly looked toward the window. The curtain was open just enough that someone outside might have been able to see in, especially with the lamp on. My living room felt exposed, like a stage. I jumped up and rushed to the window. I yanked the curtains closed so hard the rod shook. Then, I went to every window in the apartment and closed those curtains too. My heart was pounding in my ears. How did they know? I lived alone. I had not posted anything online that night. I had not told anyone I was home. I had not taken any pictures. The blue sofa was not special, but it was specific. Too specific. For the next hour, I searched my apartment like a crazy person. I looked under the bed. I opened closets. I checked behind the shower curtain. I looked in the cabinets. At one point, I even opened the fridge and stared inside, as if someone could somehow hide there. I knew it was ridiculous, but fear does not care about logic. The calls continued. Every hour or so, the phone would light up. I would not answer, but I could feel it. Even on silent, even with the screen facing down, I knew when it happened. The room seemed to change each time, like the air tightened. When I finally answered one of the calls, there was only breathing again. Slow, patient, close. I did not sleep much that night. The next few days turned into something I can only describe as a living hell. The person kept calling, and every time, they knew something they should not have known. At first, I thought they were watching my apartment from outside. That made sense, at least in a horrible way. So I kept the curtains closed. I stopped sitting near windows. I turned off lights behind me. I checked the parking lot before leaving and before coming home. But then the calls followed me outside. One afternoon, I was at the supermarket near my apartment. I only needed a few things, so I grabbed a small basket and walked through the aisles. I had milk, bread, and a frozen pizza. I remembered trying to feel normal. There were people around me, families, workers restocking shelves, an old man comparing cans of soup. It should have felt safe. Then my phone rang. Same number. My mouth went dry. I answered, but did not speak. A voice came through. It was very quiet, almost calm. The basket has milk and a frozen pizza box. You're going to walk back on the right sidewalk. I stopped in the middle of the aisle. My hand tightened around the basket handle. The voice ended the call. I looked around fast. Too fast. People noticed, but nobody looked guilty. Nobody was holding a phone to their ear. Nobody was staring at me with a smile. A woman pushed her cart past me, annoyed that I was blocking the aisle. I left the basket right there and walked out of the store. By the time I reached my car, I was shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. That was when I went to the police. I explained the calls. I showed them the messages. I told them the person knew where I was sitting, what I was buying, what I was doing. The officer listened, but I could tell he did not feel the fear the way I did. To him, it was a strange complaint, not an emergency. They checked the number and told me it was probably a burner phone, hard to trace, maybe impossible unless the person made a bigger mistake. There was no direct threat in the messages, they said. No clear statement that he was going to hurt me. They told me to block the number, keep records, and call again if something serious happened. Probably a prank, one officer said. Or maybe a jealous ex. I told him I did not have a jealous ex. He shrugged like that did not matter. But I knew it was bigger than a prank. A few days later, I was at the gym. I had started going at different times because I thought changing my routine might help. I was on a treadmill, sweating, trying to focus on the TV mounted on the wall. People were around me. Machines were humming. Music played over the speakers. My phone rang from the cup holder. Same number. I should not have answered, but I did. The voice came through, low and calm. Your sweat is dripping on your forehead. You're wearing the gray t-shirt with the small holes under the armpits. My feet slipped on the treadmill belt. I grabbed the handles and almost fell. I was wearing that shirt. It was an old shirt I only wore to the gym. I had never posted a picture in it. I had not mentioned it to anyone. And there was no one standing close enough to see the small holes unless they were watching me carefully. I looked around the gym in panic. A man was lifting weights. A woman was wiping down a machine. 2 guys were talking near the water fountain. Nobody looked at me. The call ended. After that, I started changing everything. I left work at different times. I took side streets home. I stopped going to the same gas station. I parked in different spots. I slept at a friend's place twice, though I felt embarrassed explaining why. I bought a cheap camera for my apartment window, but it never caught anything useful. Just cars, rain, shadows, and empty sidewalks. The calls still came. Once, early in the morning, I stood in my kitchen drinking coffee before work. I had barely slept the night before. I added extra sugar because I was exhausted and wanted something sweet. A minute later, my phone rang. Same number. I stared at it for a long time before answering. "The coffee is too hot today," the voice said. "You added extra sugar, like you usually do." I dropped the spoon into the sink. I ran to the kitchen window and looked outside. Across the street, there was a black car parked near the curb. I could not see inside because the windows looked dark. I blinked, leaned closer, and tried to focus. A truck passed between us. When it was gone, the black car was gone too. That was when the fear became physical. It was not just in my thoughts anymore. It lived in my body. My chest hurt all the time. My stomach twisted whenever my phone buzzed. I woke up every hour to check the door and windows. I listened for footsteps in the hallway. I kept a chair pressed under the front door handle, even though I knew it would not stop someone who really wanted to get in. I changed my phone number. For 2 days, there was silence. Those 2 days were the first time I felt like I could breathe again. I started to think maybe it was over. Maybe the person only had my old number. Maybe I had escaped. Then, on the third night, my new phone rang. Unknown number. Local area code. I did not answer. A message appeared. Changing numbers won't help. I remember sitting on the floor in my bedroom after that, with my back against the wall and my knees pulled to my chest. I kept thinking, how? How could he have my new number? Who had access to it? A coworker? A neighbor? Someone at the phone store? Someone watching my accounts? Someone who had been following me for months? I began suspecting everyone. At work, I watched my coworkers differently. If someone looked at me too long, I wondered if it was him. If someone asked how my weekend was, I wondered if they already knew. If someone laughed across the room, I wondered if it was the same muffled laugh I had heard on the phone. I checked old friends, old contacts, people I had argued with, people from past jobs, customers, delivery drivers, neighbors. I thought about every person I had ever annoyed, ignored, or forgotten. There was no answer. The police said they would try to get a camera placed on the street near my apartment, but it would take time. They were busy. These kinds of complaints happened often, they said. Stalking, harassment, prank calls, online threats. Unless someone broke in or hurt me, there was only so much they could do. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. Even simple things became terrifying. When I showered, I kept the bathroom door open so I could hear the apartment. Then I started closing it because I was afraid someone was watching from the hallway. When I went to the bathroom at night, I sometimes turned off the light and sat in darkness because I did not want anyone outside to see movement through a crack in the curtain. That was the worst part. It was not only the calls. It was the feeling that someone knew my life better than I did. Someone knew when I woke up, when I ate, when I left, where I stood, what I wore, how I drank my coffee. They had turned my own routine into a cage. 2 weeks after the first call, everything reached a breaking point. It was raining that night. Not a soft rain, but a steady, cold rain that tapped against the windows and ran down the glass in thin lines. I was sitting in the living room with all the lights off. I had stopped watching TV. I had stopped trying to distract myself. I just sat there in the dark, holding my phone, waiting for it to ring. And it did. Unknown number. I answered, but I did not say hello. For the first time, the voice spoke in full sentences. "You're sitting in the dark right now," he said, very afraid. My hand tightened around the phone. The back door isn't locked properly. I jumped up so fast I almost fell over the coffee table. My apartment had a back door that led to a small stairwell and an exit behind the building. I rarely used it. I ran through the kitchen and down the short hallway, my bare feet cold on the floor. The back door was open, not wide open, just slightly, enough for rainwater to blow in and make a dark, wet patch on the floor. I stared at it for one frozen second. Then I slammed it shut and locked it. My hands shook so hard I had to try twice. I put the chain on too, then dragged a chair against it. I called 911. My voice was shaking so badly the operator had to ask me to repeat my address. I told her someone was stalking me. Someone had opened my back door. Someone was outside my apartment. She told me officers were on their way and to stay on the line. While I was talking to her, I heard footsteps outside. Light footsteps. Slow, they moved near the back stairs, then stopped. Then came a knock. Soft, not at the front door, at the back. I backed away, still holding the phone. The unknown number called again, interrupting the 911 line. I ignored it. Then a message appeared. I know you're alone. No one will get there in time. My blood went cold. Then I heard something at the lock. A key. Someone was trying to put a key into my back door. I owned a gun. I had bought it years earlier and kept it mostly for safety, never really thinking I would need it. That night, I ran to my bedroom, opened the drawer, and grabbed it with shaking hands. I hid behind the wall near the hallway, aiming toward the back door, trying not to breathe too loudly. The sound at the lock continued, metal against metal, a slow scrape. Then footsteps moved away. A few minutes later, police lights flashed through my curtains. When the officers came in, they found me sitting on the floor with the gun lowered in my lap, shaking so badly I could barely answer their questions. They searched the apartment. They searched the back stairs. Whoever had been there was gone. The only thing they found was a muddy boot print near the back entrance. One print, just enough to prove someone had been there, but not enough to prove who. The investigation that followed was messy and disappointing. They traced the number to a fake account connected to a burner phone. They said whoever it was had likely used social media, public information, and maybe some kind of tracking or stolen data to follow me. They asked if I had any enemies. They asked if anyone from work had problems with me. They asked about old coworkers. Eventually, they arrested a man who had worked with me years before at another place. I barely remembered him. He was quiet, strange, the kind of person who blended into the background until someone mentioned his name. The police thought he might have been following me for months. They thought he might have created fake accounts to watch me. They thought he might have been the person behind the calls. But thinking is not the same as proving. There was not enough evidence, not enough to make it stick. The burner phone was never found. The fake accounts could not be tied clearly enough to him. He had an explanation for where he was on the night of the break-in, and even though it sounded weak to me, it was enough. He walked free. After that, I left. I moved to another city. I changed apartments. I changed my number again. I deleted social media. I stopped using my old email. I even changed my name legally and started living under an alias. It sounds extreme until you understand what it feels like to be hunted by someone who never shows his face. For a while, things were quiet. Then one night, my new phone lit up. Unknown number. No message. No name. Just a missed call. I told myself it could be anything. a wrong number, spam, a mistake. The next night, there was another one. Then, another. Sometimes I answer, even though I know I should not. When I do, there is no voice, only breathing. Soft, steady, listening. No one fully believes me anymore. The police closed the file. Friends tell me I am safe now. People say I need to move on, that fear can stay in your head after something traumatic. Maybe they are partly right. Maybe some of it is in my head now. But every night, when the phone lights up in the dark, my body knows the truth before my mind can argue. He is still out there. He is still watching. And someday, I think he will come closer than a phone call. Story 5. My name is James Strickland, and I am writing this because I do not know how much time I have left. I am using a stolen phone. I am not proud of that. But right now, pride does not matter. Rules do not matter. Nothing matters except getting this down before they take the phone away from me, or before I become too weak to type, or before she finds another way to reach me. They keep telling me I am sick in the head. They keep telling me I imagined everything. They keep telling me there were no calls, no voice, no old woman, no creature at my door. They say I killed an innocent man. They say I murdered the postman. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know that whatever came to my door was not human. Before all this happened, my life was boring, but it was mine. Since the pandemic started, I had been working from home. At first, it felt like one of the only good things to come out of that horrible time. I know a lot of people hated being stuck indoors, but for me, it was safer. I am high risk. I have diabetes and asthma, and from the start of the pandemic, every news report felt like it had been written to scare people like me. Every cough from a stranger, every crowded lift, every packed bus, every careless person breathing too close felt like a threat. I lived alone on the top floor of an old tower block in London, 13 floors up. The place was not pretty, but the rent was manageable. And the view from my windows made the city look almost peaceful when the weather was clear. The building itself was old, ugly, and always making noise. Pipes clicked at night. The lift groaned like it was dying. The hallway smelled of dust, old cooking oil, and damp carpet. Still, it was home. I worked as a customer service advisor for an insurance company. My job was awful. There is no polite way to say it. It was boring, draining, and mind-numbing. I spent all day listening to people complain about their insurance claims, their delays, their missing paperwork, their sick pets, their broken cars, their flooded kitchens, their dead relatives, and their anger at our company. Sometimes they had every right to be angry. Sometimes they were just looking for someone to shout at. Either way, I was the person on the other end of the phone, paid just enough to sit there and take it. Working from home made it bearable. I would get up, make coffee, grab something quick to eat, and turn on both laptops. One was my work laptop. The other was my desktop computer for gaming. Then I would log into the company system and start taking calls through the secure server. The calls were recorded, monitored, timed, and judged like every second of my day belonged to someone else. But at home, I could at least pretend I had some freedom. I could sit in my underwear. I could play video games between calls or during the really boring ones where customers put me on hold to find documents they should have had ready before calling. I could avoid the office noise, the forced small talk, and the colleagues who chewed too loudly, talked too much, or acted like insurance was a sacred mission instead of a depressing job nobody enjoyed. Then the company decided we had to come back in. Not everyone at once, they said, just slowly, just safely, just a few days at first. But I knew what that meant. It meant the safety I had built around myself was being taken away piece by piece. I argued. I explained my health issues. I sent documents. I asked to stay remote. They said they would review it. That meant no. So when this started, I was already stressed. I was already sleeping badly. I was already scared of getting sick. Maybe that is why they think I imagined it. But stress does not make a phone ring when the system is closed. Stress does not crack a front door down the middle. Stress does not leave blood on your clothes. My normal workday was always the same. I would log in around 9, put on my headset, and start taking calls. On a busy day, I spoke to about 50 people. Most of them were annoyed before I even said hello. I would repeat the same lines over and over again until the words no longer felt like language. I'm sorry to hear that. I understand your frustration. Let me check the notes on your claim. I'll just place you on hold for a moment. Every call came through the secure system. Customers could not call me directly. My work phone was not a public number. It only worked when I was logged in, or at least that was what I had always been told. The phone lines closed at 8 in the evening. After that, nobody should have been able to reach me. Last Monday, during my shift, I got the first strange call. It came through like any other call. The line clicked. I gave my usual greeting. Thanks for calling. You're speaking with James. How can I help today? At first, there was no answer. Just breathing. Deep, heavy breathing. I sat there for a moment, waiting. This kind of thing happened sometimes. People pocket dialed. People got angry and refused to speak. Teenagers called for fun when they found numbers online, though that should not have been possible through our system. Hello? I said. Can you hear me? The breathing continued. Then came a sound behind it. Something wet and low, like someone dragging air through a throat full of fluid. Then the voice said my name. James. It was quiet at first. James, I frowned at my screen. The system did not always show caller details right away, but customers usually gave names, policy numbers, something. This voice gave nothing. Can I take your policy number, please? I asked. James. The voice got louder. James, then louder. James. It kept repeating my name again and again until it was no longer saying it. It was screaming it. The voice became rough and broken, like several throats were trying to speak at once. I gave the usual warnings. We had a script for abusive calls. If you continue to shout, I will have to end the call. The voice screamed my name again. Second warning. Third warning. Then I disconnected. For a few minutes, I just sat there staring at the screen. My hands were cold. I told myself it was a prank. A weird one, but still a prank. I had dealt with worse. People are strange when they think they are hidden behind a phone line. The rest of the shift was normal. Angry customers, delayed claims, boring notes. At 5, I logged off. That night, I went to bed around 11. Lockdown had made me tired all the time. I do not know if it was the lack of fresh air, the stress, the same walls every day, or just the heaviness of living through something that seemed to have no end. I fell asleep quickly. Then, at midnight, my work phone rang. I woke with such a shock that I nearly fell out of bed. At first, I did not understand what the sound was. The room was dark. The tower block was quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. Then the phone rang again. My work phone. That was impossible. I was logged out. The office lines were closed. The number was not public. Nobody should have been able to call it. I got out of bed and hurried toward my desk, but the ringing stopped before I reached it. I stood there in the dark, breathing hard, staring at the phone. For a while, nothing happened. I told myself it must have been some kind of technical glitch. Maybe the system had not fully disconnected. Maybe someone had called earlier and the signal delayed. I knew that did not really make sense. But tired people will accept almost anything if it lets them go back to bed. I lay down again. Just after 2 in the morning, it rang again. This time, I froze under the covers. It rang and rang, each sound sharp in the darkness. Then it stopped. At 3, it rang again. After that, I unplugged it from the wall. The next morning, I reported it to my manager. His name does not matter. He was the kind of manager who always sounded like he was doing you a favor by listening. I explained that my work phone had received calls in the middle of the night, even though I was logged out and the lines were closed. He laughed a little and said it was probably a technical issue. "I'll get support to look into it," he said. "Don't worry about it." I knew from his tone that he was already not worrying about it. My shift started normally. Calls came in one after another. People complained about hold times, which had been terrible since the pandemic started. Everyone was understaffed. Everyone was angry. Everyone wanted their problem solved first. At around 11 in the morning, I got a call from an old woman. Her voice was thin and cracked, but there was strength under it. She sounded like someone very old who still knew exactly how to hurt you. "Why didn't you answer the phone, James?" I thought she meant the company line. Customers said things like that all the time. "I'm really sorry about the wait," I said. "We have been experiencing a high volume of calls, but I'm happy to help you now." The old woman laughed. Not a normal laugh. A sharp, ugly cackle that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her lungs. "No, James," she said. "I called you last night. A few times. You didn't answer." My mouth went dry. For a second, I could not speak. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe she had called the company the night before and could not get through. Maybe the system somehow routed her complaint to me. Maybe she was confused. Customers confuse details all the time. "I'm sorry," I said carefully. "Our lines close at 8 in the evening. You may have reached an automated message." She went quiet. Then she said my full name. James Strickland. I felt every hair on my body rise. We did not give customers our full names. They got first names only. My full name was not something a random caller should have known. "I'll call again tonight," she said. "You better answer me, or you'll regret it." Then the line went dead. I sat there with my headset on, staring at nothing. My next call came through almost immediately. A man started shouting about a claim for his sick cat before I even had a chance to breathe properly. I had to keep working. That is the strange thing about fear when you have a job like mine. Something can chill your blood, and 30 seconds later you still have to apologize to someone because their claim has not been updated. That night, I stayed awake. I told myself I was not scared, but I was sitting at my desk with the lights on, playing video games and watching the work phone like it was a snake. At midnight, it rang. I grabbed it immediately, my heart pounding in my throat. "Thanks for calling," I said quickly. "You're speaking to James, but our offices are closed until 9 tomorrow morning." Please call us back then. There was a pause. Then an old man spoke. James Strickland. I almost dropped the phone. His voice was low, rough, and tired, not like the old woman. This voice sounded frightened. I need to tell you something, he said. Who is this? I shouted. This isn't funny. The old man made a gurgling, choking sound. For a moment, I thought he was dying on the line. Then he forced out the words. Don't fall asleep. My skin went cold. If you fall asleep, you won't wake up. I'm trying to protect you from her, but she's getting stronger. He broke into a terrible coughing fit. It sounded wet and deep, like his lungs were full. I gripped the phone so hard my fingers hurt. Who is she? I asked. What the hell is going on? I felt a stupid little stab of panic after swearing on the work phone, even though the situation was already far beyond company policy. The old man's breathing came through the line. If your phone rings again tonight, he said, don't answer it. Then the call ended. I did not sleep, not even for a minute. The phone rang 3 more times that night. I sat there, every time, staring at it, shaking, letting it ring until it stopped. I wanted to unplug it again, but some part of me was scared that would make things worse. I do not know why. Fear does not always make sense. At 9 in the morning, I called my manager again. I told him everything. The call from the old woman, the midnight call, the old man warning me not to sleep, the phone ringing after hours. He gave a tired little laugh. Weird, mate, he said. Look, lockdown is hard on all of us. Take a few days off. That made me angry. No, I said. I need you to pull the recordings. Find out who is making these calls. Can we block the number? He sighed like I was being difficult. I'll see what I can do. I better go. I've got a Zoom meeting. Take care. I'll catch up with you in a few days. He was not going to do anything. I knew it. I sat at my desk for a while after the call, shaking with anger and fear. The flat felt too quiet. Outside, the sky was gray. The city below looked distant and unreal. Then, my doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. I had barely seen anyone in person for months. I got food delivered sometimes, but I always asked them to leave it outside. I avoided people as much as I could because I was terrified of catching the virus. The bell rang again. I moved slowly toward the front door. Before I reached it, I heard laughing, a cackle. My stomach dropped. Then came scratching. Something was dragging nails across the outside of my door. I stopped in the hallway, unable to move. The scratching continued, slow and deliberate. Then the cackling rose again, the same awful sound from the phone. It was right outside my flat. I did not open the door. I quietly slid the chain into place and leaned toward the peephole. At first, all I saw was black. Not the hallway, not a person standing too close. Just blackness, as if something had covered the other side completely. Then an eye appeared. It filled the peephole. A horrible bloodshot eye stared directly into mine. I stumbled back. The cackling turned into a shriek. Then the banging began. The door shook so hard the frame rattled. I screamed and ran backward. Another hit came, louder than the first. Wood cracked down the middle of the door. I ran into my bedroom and grabbed my mobile phone to call the police. It was dead. No battery. That made no sense. It had been charging all night. I plugged it in again, but nothing happened. No light, no sound, nothing. I grabbed the work phone next. Before I could dial, the same horrible cackling blasted from the receiver. I slammed it down. It kept laughing. I picked it up and tried to hang up again and again, but every time, the shriek came back through the handset. The banging at the door grew louder. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife I had, and ran back into the hallway. Go away, I screamed. The thing outside laughed. A chunk of wood broke away from the top of the door. Through the crack, I saw hair. Long, dirty, gray hair. Matted and wet-looking, hanging over a face I will never forget. The face was not human. Not anymore. It was filthy and twisted, covered in open sores that leaked yellow pus and dark red fluid. The skin looked scaly in places and soft in others, like it was rotting while still alive. Its eyes were pale with cataracts, but somehow they still found me. They were wild and full of hatred. "I'm going to make you sick, James," it screamed. "I'm going to make you sick, and you'll die." It laughed again. That laugh broke something in me. I do not remember deciding to open the door. I only remember screaming as I removed the chain and pulled it open. The knife was raised in my hand. The thing lunged. So did I. I drove the knife into it up to the handle. It shrieked. I stabbed again, and again, and again. Even after the shrieking stopped, I kept stabbing. Blood and thick fluid sprayed over my hands, my clothes, my face. I was crying, screaming, maybe laughing too. I do not know. When I finally stopped, the thing lay in the doorway, dead, or at least still. I looked down at it and knew it was not a person. It was disease given a body. Small openings covered its skin. From those holes, scaly, knotted tentacles pushed out and twitched weakly. Its sores blinked like tiny wet eyes. Pus and dark fluids pooled under it and spread across the floor. The smell was unbearable. Rotten meat, sickness, old hospitals, and damp cloth. I vomited over the body. Then I ran back inside to call the police again. The work phone was still laughing. My laptop screen lit up. The old woman was there. So was my desktop monitor. So was the television. Her ruined face filled every screen, grinning through sores and gray hair. Her tentacles pressed against the glass from the other side, sliding and tapping as if she were trying to push through. Then they did push through. Thin, scaly tendrils reached out of the laptop screen toward me.